Welcome to Around the Farm. I'm Steve Greggerson here with Site Director Andy Hite, and we got a nice, pretty day to go around the farm today.
That's right. We're actually on the farm where it's nice out today. It's cool out, and our director said, "Let's go outside today." And being the good listeners we were, we said, "Sounds fine to me."
That's right, because I hate for them to get out a big club and start beating on us.
It's not a pretty picture.
It's not at all.
So we are around the farm today, and thought that we might talk about some. I think we've probably talked about it before, but we're going to talk about it again. And if I'm sorry about their luck, we're going to talk a little bit today about the era of the War of 1812 here, primarily the Council of Piqua, and more specifically John's role in that event and the things that were happening here when that happened. Now, when the Council of Piqua was called, this house wasn't here yet. It was under construction. They were living in a two-story log cabin out by close to where the parking lot is now. This was just being begun then. John had come back here. He had resigned his agency post in Fort Wayne in 1811. He had moved back here, citing ill health. It took him another 50 years to die, and came back to become a gentleman farmer. Of course, European events and world events were heating up. The War of 1812 came about, and John was appointed federal Indian agent for Western Ohio with the chore of his primary responsibility at that point was to keep the Indians out of the War of 1812 on the side of the British, because one of the last things the Americans could afford to do at that point was to fight a two-front war.
And this certainly was a real challenging area to be in at that point in time.
Well, it was, because you had the British influence still in the upper Great Lakes, even though after the Revolutionary War, Britain was to vacate their posts on American soil, and that had not happened. So you had the influence of the British, who saw the Indians as a potential ally against the Americans, and yeah, this was a challenging time. So this kind of sets the stage for what's going to happen. Then middle of the summer, the War Department tells John to call a council of the Western tribes to get him here to negotiate a neutrality agreement, and just, well, we need a little bit of time, so it takes place a little bit later. We're just about the time of the Council of Piqua now.
Okay.
Give or take a little bit. So it just delayed to get people here, and the gist of it is to get neutrality out of the Indians. And it's interesting to look at the time that we were during the war, too. Usually when you negotiate a treaty like that, you should be negotiating from a position of strength. And the United States was not in a position of strength. It had been one military disaster after another. The push into Canada had failed. General Hall had surrendered the American Army in Detroit without a shot being fired, which, you know all that. You taught American history.
Yes.
You remember the stories. And so here we are getting ready to tell the Indians, well, we can fight this war ourselves. We don't need your help. We just don't want you to fight with it against us. Yeah, right. So this is what they're tasked with doing. And so he's sent out a call, and some of the tribes have responded. And when I first came here, and you probably heard the same story that I heard, that, well, John Johnston had 10,000 Indians on this site in 1812.
Right.
I think and we've all talked about that around here. I think I saw where that came from, because when they called the Council of Piqua, one of the things that John did in preparation was order 10,000 rifles. And in the military mind, that's enough for one food. Yeah, that's enough food for one person per day. So they're feeding a multitude of people, but not
Were there troops here at that time too, or was that?
Not appreciably. There were the commissioners here. Harrison wasn't here until later. After Hall surrendered, Harrison eventually brought his forces up here, and Harrison was on site when he was given command of the Western armies. But they weren't necessarily at the same time, which would have helped if the army would have been here. We could have at least might have been a little more motivation to agree to this thing. But I tell people, and I know Marla has done it, and Sherry has done it too, has told people that I think the sense of the people at that time was a lot like the sense of people during at the time of 9/11. If people would have known what was happening,
Right.
If Wolf Blitzer would have been around, or you'd had instantaneous news being around, you would have known that all this stuff was happening, and it wasn't happening good. And you're right, this area was very much under threat, whether it was real or perceived.
I guess you look at, it hasn't been that many years before that we finally brought around the Treaty of Greenville, and there's still got to be some hard feelings over all that. And, it's a lot of things there that could have gone pretty nasty pretty quick.
Yeah, this was a very tense time, and the big fear out here in the West, and it was funny, I keep reminding people that when all this was happening, this was the American frontier.
Right.
That really, if you went any further west, the United States wasn't there yet. And so the big fear, again, real or perceived, you keep hearing Indian attack, and there's very few militia troops out here. There's a Miami County militia at that time, but their job was to just kind of patrol this northern upper part of this valley, and if they weren't here, you were on your own. And John talks about having $30,000 worth of trade goods, and I did this the other day, and my brain just went away. In those dollars, it was like $150,000 worth of stuff or something like that, give or take. My math is, I was a history teacher, I wasn't a math teacher. That's a lot of stuff. He said, and he had that in his barn, and he had, he went through, nothing to protect it. So the threat of Indian attack was something that was feared. So okay, so here they are. They're bringing Indians in together to try to negotiate a treaty. So that's what's going on, and this was, and John writes about it about that time, and people in Miami County didn't see the humor in Indians being encamped on the Johnston farm. They didn't see that as something that they were real pleased with. And John got a lot of criticism locally for that fact. So he wasn't the most popular person in the world, and there was a lot of, you read that there was a lot of animosity, and he was trying to tell the Indians, look, you got to make nice with the white guys. He's telling the white guys, you got to make nice with the Indians, because we don't want this whole thing to blow up in our face. Because I think he realized that he was sitting on a powder keg.
That could have, it's amazing that he was able to bring those people here, get some results, and like you say, not have everything just blow up and be a terrible mess.
Yeah, and this agency had just been established, although he had contact with a lot of the folks from his time at Fort Wayne, so he wasn't a person who was unfamiliar,
right,
to the native population. People knew who John Johnston was. And I kind of jokingly tell people, and I realize this is showing my age a little bit, but I tell people, do you remember the old E.F. Hutton commercials? When E.F. Hutton talks, everybody listens. Yeah, I think that's kind of what, if John was saying, yeah, this is a, even though, can they really pull this off? So it's an interesting period of time, and I know that when I taught American history, when I taught the War of 1812, this was never mentioned.
No, I can't find it in any textbooks or anything.
You never see anything about the Council of Piqua.
Mm-mm.
But the successful conclusion of that, and there were a couple of other agreements similar to that around this area. This wasn't the only one, but the importance of that was that now American troops and supplies and reinforcements could move up and down this valley relatively unmolested. Had the Indians not agreed to that, would have been the War of 1812 would have been a whole lot different, I think.
Yeah, it could have. If the native population would have been against us, I think we probably would have lost that a lot. If hadn't lost the war, we certainly could have lost this whole Ohio Valley, whole Ohio country kind of thing, because, boy, they could have done us in real quick.
Yeah,
kind of scary.
Yeah,
Think back.
And again, it goes back to media. If people would have known this,
right? How many weeks did it take for that information to even come out here?
Yeah.
Boy, pretty. It's almost mind-boggling when you start thinking about it. You turn to your smartphone, the TV, the internet, and it's there today, and you find out what just happened.
Yeah, we take that for granted.
Right. Exactly.
We're used to instant everything, instant information, instant entertainment, and like when they captured Saddam, pictures of him coming out of the hole in the ground. That didn't exist then, which is probably lucky for everybody in 1812 that wasn't here.
Right.
Although everybody knew what had happened in Detroit.
Right.
That was, it's just unbelievable to me to when you really think about all the American disasters at that 1812, that this actually happened here. So it's a great, it's one of those unsung events in American history, and I wish people would know more about that. So, and we didn't have 10,000 Indians here. We had 700-800 total, and but that still was unnerving. And the bulk of the people that stayed over the winter were Delaware. That stayed over the winter, and there were a couple of reasons for that. At that point when they're coming in here, this is starting to be the beginning of harvest season. So if they're not home to harvest their crops, there's no food for winter. And also, I've seen a couple of accounts, and I don't know that this is true or not, was that it had been a bad crop year anyway, so food was a little scarce. And the other thing was there was fear on the Delaware side, fear of retribution from other native people that didn't necessarily buy into this whole treaty business. So for their safety, they felt that Johnston could protect them, and so and feed them, and so they were here. And you read the newspaper accounts again, going back to the fact that the people in this area weren't real happy with that going on. So neat event isn't the right word. Important event.
Yes.
Hugely important. Never mentioned. But now, how's this for a segue? But
yes, I think there may be some way for people today to get some more information about this.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. There's been a couple fairly recently scholarly journals printed, and good accounts of the events, but it's not going to be something that's going to be distributed widely enough for people to really read, and it's a scholarly paper. It's not. It's well written, but it's not written for general consumption. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But we have on staff an author, one of our staff members, Marla Fair, and Marla has written a book called a measure taken. Imagine I have this right here.
I can't imagine that. That just instantaneously appeared there.
Isn't that coincidental?
Yes.
And it says, John Johnston in the War of 1812. And even better, not only do we have the book, we've got the author. Now, you talk about coincidence, right?
That was.
Isn't that surprising?
That is.
And I asked Marla if she would spend a little bit of time with us and talk about getting her book ready and what's included in the book, and of course then where you can purchase her book, because it is now available for purchase. And I believe that I'm sitting beside the first purchaser.
Really? All right.
Of the first copy, hot off the press.
Now I won't be able to surprise Mindy at Christmas. I'll just have to give it to her today, I guess. Because she said she wanted a copy of that book. So
I want to see that. I want to see you wait till Christmas, and I want to see her accept just a book for Christmas present.
Well, it'd be a stocking stuffer maybe here.
Okay. Well, let's have Marla come in and let's talk about the book a little bit.
Hello.
Hey there. Well, this is your second book, right?
Second book for the Johnston Chronicles.
Yeah, the first book, amazing. I have that one.
Oh my gosh, another instantaneous
Yeah,
find.
imagine that. Marla's first book was called In the Midst of Danger, and this talks about John during his Fort Wayne agency years.
Correct.
And then this one picks up the story after John has moved here with his young family and is tasked with the Council of Piqua. So, what were the biggest challenges you had? I know there were many,
yeah.
but what was the biggest wallenge you had in drafting, in writing this book?
Well, the thing was, within the midst of danger, there was not a lot of research that could be done. The Johnsons' time at Fort Wayne, for his business, yes, but for the family, there's not
Oh,
many,
so you made stuff up?
yeah, there's not many references.
Oh, okay, so it's fictional history.
The first one is more fictional history, the second one is more historical fiction. So the first one is probably, I would say, 60-40 more fiction. This one had, I think there's 180 footnotes at the back of the book. There was a huge amount of research done to write this one, because basically during the War of 1812, and especially May to September, where I put it, there were weeks I could plot where Mr. Johnson was every single day. So there's all this history to back it up. So it was a very different writing experience doing the new one, and I wanted to make sure I got it right. I started it with the Wolverton incident over in Greenville, so there was research about 1812 Greenville, and then I had to figure out how the heck John got to Greenville. You have to figure out how long it takes them and where they go. So all kinds of things like that take a lot of time and a lot of research. You were talking about how long did it take someone to get from one place to the other, or news. You've got to backtrack on letters, because they'll say something, but that doesn't mean it's happened. So then you got to figure out how long it took it to happen and what was going. And so it's just a lot of research. So that was probably the biggest challenge of it. And then learning about the Council of Piqua was another one, because that's part 3, kind of major portion of the book. So it's split into 4 parts. Ends with the siege of Fort Wayne, basically. So there was a lot.
And then that siege had to been especially tough for John emotionally with the death of his brother Stephen.
Well, you were talking about the fact that the town was not happy about it. The county was not happy about it. The big city was not happy about it. There's articles in the Ohio Sentinel from Dayton basically saying that John was lying, basically, about what was going on here. So you deal with all of that and that reaction of all the people going on, and then the fact that he's standing up in the midst of people at town meetings saying, these Indians are peaceful, these Indians won't hurt anybody. And then his brother's dead because the Indians killed him. So it's kind of an interesting...
Yeah, that's a little difficult.
And you wonder what he walking around this house was thinking when his brother was dead at the hand of Indians, but he was still supporting the Indians. So had to be kind of a moral choice, a difficult
But
time.
I think with the death of Stephen in Fort Wayne, and we've got a physical evidence of that with that big. We have down in the basement a big brass kettle
Yeah.
that had belonged to the British Army, that has the story of being liberated after Stevens was killed.
Right.
You know, I think that puts a different light on it, because that shows what we were talking about before. That shows who was instigating the Indians.
Right.
You know, it shows the British influence at that point on that particular group of the natives. And you're right, though. You know, John's big fear was trying to make everybody play well with each other here.
Right. Yeah, and that probably put a small bump in the road for a little bit.
I suspect it was more than a small bump, because there's several stories of John walking up just at the point where both sides are ready to come to blows with each other. So yeah, you see that this was no small task for him to
the
pull
thing
it.
that's interesting about historical fiction is you base it as much on history as you can, but then you make those intuitive leaps and you try to make people connect with the people. You want them to read the book and not see a scholarly piece that they might find boring, but you want them to recognize that these were real human beings dealing with real issues.
Well, and I think
you know.
that comes through in both books. I know, you know, we joked about this first one because, you know, you admitted at the beginning that In the Midst of Danger was more of almost a romantic historical novel.
Yeah.
And
It starts with an elopement. I mean,
yeah, you know, I know. But, you know, normally those kind of books make me gag. But this one doesn't, because you do connect with the things that the family went through.
Right.
And the same thing is going to be true with this, because if you really think about, put yourself in the summer of 1812 and the things that were going on, you know, you can make that connection with these characters hugely easily.
When the story opens in May, there's been pockets of killing around them. There's been several people killed at Greenville, several people killed at Defiance. They were having horrific weather. They were having tornadoes. They had an earthquake. The New Madrid earthquake was still rattling under their feet. You know, the prophet had said that the sun would go dark, and it did. People were flying just like madness away from the frontier. And here stood this man in the midst of all this trying to stem that tide, which is what the PR on the book says. You know, it was an amazing time period. I always tell the guests when they come through, the visitors, I say, you know, the way that a lot of us felt the week after 9/11 is the way these people felt in May of 1812.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, all those defeats started coming, Michilimackinac, Detroit, Dearborn, you know, right in the middle of the council. News coming every day as the council was going on. So it's a tremendously interesting period of time to have tried to figure out, you know, what was going on.
And to look at, going back to look at the outcome that they were able to arrive at with this is just, it is just, some of our diplomats today might look at some of this and learn from it, perhaps.
Definitely so.
You know, because, and admittedly, John wasn't in the forefront in the fact that he wasn't one of the peace commissioners.
Right.
But you have to wonder, you know, in the background, how much impact, you know, how much influence his voice had in all of this.
Yeah, quite a bit, I would imagine.
You know, because he would have been the individual that the native population would have been the most familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't have known, you know, Thomas Worthington or, you know, that none of that would have.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Big wigs. I think I actually say that in the book.
So, you know, if you want to learn more about this, where can they get this?
They can go online to www.marlafair.books.com. I kept it simple. My name's Marla Fair, books at the end of it. There's also a Facebook page with the same name, and both of those places you can purchase through. It links through PayPal online. If you're interested in money order or check, you can also just connect through there with the other information given as far as like just emailing me. Also, we do have it at the Site Museum.
That's what I was going to say. If you want the book easy and
way to get it
is
is
come
just
to the
come out
museum
here.
shop, and you know, part of your purchase, if you buy it at the museum shop,
Right.
supports the site.
Part of your purchase all the time supports the site, but also, did you want to mention October?
Oh, yes, thank you.
No.
Our fall event in October the 3rd,
Yeah.
3rd,
Yes, yes.
October 3rd is our fall celebration. And that morning, likely at 10 o'clock, we'll do a program that'll kind of build around this. We'll talk about, you know, again, we'll talk about Johnston and the War of 1812. Marla will be there to talk about the book in more depth. And at that point, we'll have a few copies if somebody would just, you know, want to take one of these home with them.
Yeah.
And I suspect that since you're going to be there, you could probably be coerced into
Signing.
into autographing a copy or two. So,
Do that.
you know, and that's not, the October date is not too far after the conclusion of the Council of Piqua, so it's sort of at a good time to do that.
Right. That's why I wanted to get it out now, because this was the time of the council, and here we are. What is it, 203 years later?
Yeah, my
so,
math, yeah, that's 1812, yeah.
The events of
200
this book were taking place right here, right now, all that time ago, so.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, you know, if people really, I'm going to get philosophical for a minute, I'm sorry. You know, if you come to this place and you really think about all the events that took place where we're sitting today,
That's amazing.
you know, there's not a lot of places in Ohio that can say that. You know, this place had such an impact.
Yeah.
And the family that lived here had such an impact that, you know, this is one of the historical treasure troves in Ohio in terms of what's happened here. So there, I'll stop.
You know, speaking of treasure troves, you know what's coming up here in just a short period of time? The big yellow troop carriers.
The yellow troop carriers are about to invade the site. Now, for those of you that don't know what we're talking about when we say yellow troop carriers, of course we're referring to school buses. Middle of September through the end of October, we start to see our fall school groups. We're getting geared up for that now, and it's, you know, those are fun to watch the school kids and see what strikes their interest. Amazingly, how well prepared they are when they get here. You know, our area teachers do such a good job, I think, of that. And the things that we talk about here with the kids, and we've talked about this before, are exactly the things that are built into the 4th grade social studies guidelines and curriculum. So, and that's what I tell them in the museum. I say, you know, most 4th graders get a picture or you know, maybe get a PowerPoint or if they're really lucky, a movie of some sort. But, you know, you guys are standing where this stuff really happened. And you know, that's very lucky for a kid to be able to do that, I think.
Yeah, you know, the neat thing is, too, the kids really seem to like what they're doing here and enjoy it. They don't look at it as just a day out of school, and it becomes a classroom. And
Well,
that's
when you lie to them.
Well, I've been known to tell one or two.
Tall tales.
Yes.
Yeah, some of the tales are taller than others. And you never know, you never know what each individual student is going to. You know, I've shared the story about what one young lady wanted to call a donkey and a mule, or a donkey and a horse. Remember that? And I told her, no, that name was already taken. and the story that happened in the winter kitchen about the hot dogs.
Oh, yeah. That was a while back.
So, yeah, it's fun. You know, the kids come here, there's a lot of energy.
Well, some days it's more than others.
More energetic than others, yes. And some of the groups, size-wise, are a little more challenging than others. But, you know, the fact that you know, we see the number of students we do and the quality of the students we do.
Yeah.
I think really does reflect well on what you guys do in interacting with the students. And I think that's part of, I said this in a program a while back, I think that's part of the reason why we've gotten the AAM accreditation is what, you know, the staff and the volunteers do as they're interacting with students and the adult visitors too in the summer, because we've still got another week or so of public visits, and it looks like we're going to be busy. And we shift gears, and you're right, it'll be Yellow Troop carrier time very shortly. And then we have our fall event in October 3rd, with the authors program in the morning. And we'll probably have some time too to talk about in the midst of danger while they're there, and talk a little bit about the Fort Wayne years. And really, you know, you can't, I'm backing up a little bit, you can't underestimate the Fort Wayne years, because those were the years that shaped John. And those are the years that shaped the way he looked at Native culture and the Native people and the thought process. And I don't think it hurt. I suspect Rachel, his wife, probably had a lot to do with that, with her Quaker upbringing and her outlook on things. I think she probably helped John come to where he was as a person dealing with the Native population. So we can't underestimate those Fort Wayne years, even though in some ways they were very contentious because he and Wells didn't get along.
There's another book, yes.
Yeah, and you know, being burned out of their house because the other traders didn't like having John Johnston there. You know, there's lots of stories that, you know, you think about what all this guy went through.
That's amazing.
You know, it's no wonder that during this time period that we're talking about of the 1812 that he writes, well, I've gotten up today and I may not see the setting of the sun, and you know, I don't know who's out to bump me off, sort of thing. You know. And when you look at what you were talking about the way that people felt about the people that were camped here, it's no wonder that John felt the way he did. Yeah. You know, it wasn't just the Indians that he might have been a little concerned about. It was, you know, the white guys who were living here too. Yep. So, lots going on out here. And what's, okay, we've got up through the War of 18, you know, we've got War of 18. What's next?
I've been trying to do every 10 years. So it will be around 1823, 24. The major incident at that point is the Pendleton, Indiana massacre at Fall Creek. But that's been written about before, so I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. But it's never been written from Mr. Johnson's point of view.
Right. And that's
why I think it might be worth doing. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of for the next one.
And that's an interesting event too, because that was the first time that whites were arrested, tried, convicted, and executed for killing Indians. Yeah. So, you know, this is important.
It's an amazing story.
But you know, you look at all the stuff this guy touched, and it's huge. People have asked me, well, why doesn't anybody ever know about Johnson? Well, he didn't have a good publicist.
Yes, exactly.
And I think in some ways
we're trying to change that.
Well, we are trying to change it. I know that scholar, the academic publication that we talked about, I know he's working on a biography of Johnston. But again, that's going to be probably a little bit more on the scholarly side, where your books...
That's for the head, mine are for the heart.
Oh.
You'll like it better this time. Not as much romance.
Wow.
Hey, he had 15 children. It's got to be in there somehow.
Well, let's not go down that road. But you know, there's room for more of these. There's room for both types of works, and so you know, I hope that people do learn to appreciate John Johnston and learn to appreciate the depth and the breadth of his work. When you go into that next book, if you go into the 1820s, then of course you culminate the 1820s with the fact that the election of 28, and you get him being thrown out of office.
And the first involvement with the canal also.
And I was just talking to a group, said, you know, he was a canal commissioner, and think about this. The canal goes right past his back door. And somebody said, coincidence.
That's, I always tell the adults that, you know, that politics were pure, innocent, simple, and straightforward in those days, so they, you know, it just happened that it
Is
came right
that
through
another
his...
tall tale?
No, I always tell them that.
Was that carried on the back
And
of
I
the canal
tell them that,
alligator?
I tell them it followed the river anyhow.
Right.
However, I'm sure he knew he had riverfront property.
Well, the other example I used of that was John Hilliard buying property west of Columbus because he knew the railroad was going
Exactly.
through, and then calling the town Hilliard.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
That's hard to believe that those kind of things happened even back then.
Well, you know, I think we've covered what we wanted to. I appreciate you taking time today, Marla, to talk a little bit about your book. And if people, you know where to find it,
Yep.
you know, don't hesitate to stop out and get your copy. Be the second person. You know, Steve was the first.
So I've got a first edition then.
Yes, you do.
You have
Whoa.
you have a first edition.
So in
First
a couple
online
hundred years,
sale.
it'll be worth lots and lots of money.
Hey.
It'll be exactly what.
As I always tell people, I hope your copy is worth $1 million. Because then that means mine would be worth a bit more than that.
Well, I think we've.
Time to wrap things up.
I
and-
think so. I think we've covered what we needed to cover today. We've certainly enjoyed sitting outside in the nice breeze
Oh, it's
today.
beautiful out here today.
Couldn't ask for a better day to be doing this.
No way. And you know, the one nice thing too is that we need to thank our world famous director, videographer, producer, Grip. All
Grip
around,
or dip?
Grip.
all around nice guy, Mr. Joe Teach.
And don't forget, humble as the day is long.
I always forget that for some
And
reason.
you know, today he didn't once holler about, I need to stay in the shade.
That's true, he didn't. So with that, we wrap it up and see you next month around the farm.